Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our study session in January. Thank you for being here. I'd just like to welcome our newest council member, Rich Adams in District 1. Thank you for your time here and being elected, and all those that have been reelected. Thank you. And this is a really neat occasion. I get to switch seats a little bit from over there to here, and just be able to work with all of you. It's just fantastic. It's super impressive. And I just look forward to working with our council and all of you, and I just really appreciate our city staff. You're phenomenal. So Vice Mayor Frankie Heredia will be joining us on Zoom, and so everybody's here, so we're ready to start. So council, if we can review the agenda for next Monday, I'd appreciate it, and let us know if there's any questions, and we can go from there. Mr. Brady, is there anything that I forgot? I mean, this is my first rodeo.
I had asked,
We have some questions right now.
if we could,
On one of your,
yes, but 8 and 9, if we could do the presentation on 8B and 9B for the council in case they have questions.
thank you, Mary and Evan. You seem so close now.
We've always been close. New council member, Mr. Adams, it's nice to meet you. Today we have two presentations. The first one's going to be on Medina Station, and this is a project we've been working on for some time to really bolster the quality of the development that we're seeing on this site. It's a mixed-use site that includes some commercial development as well as some residential development. What you'll see today, and Evan will go through the details, is we're actually looking at a detailed site plan for the commercial portion and then conceptual plans for the residential portion. So there is a concurrent annexation that goes with this project. There's also a site plan review and a council use permit. This is, again, a mixed-use development that we've really worked hard to get a good quality development here. There are some nuances and really some specific asks that we had of the developer, and we've come to a really good place, we think, with the overall site plan that you'll hear about. So, Evan, if you wanted to go through the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Good morning, Mayor and Council. As Mary mentioned, there are a number of requests associated with this case. There's a rezone from agriculture to LC limited commercial with a planned area development overlay, a council use permit, a site plan review. There's also a concurrent annexation request. I'll talk about that in just a second. And as Mary mentioned, this is to allow for the development of a mixed use development. The subject property is outlined in blue on this slide here. It goes from Southern Avenue on the north to US 60 on the south, and it is on the east side of Signal Butte. It is currently in the county. It's a former state land parcel that the applicant is requesting to annex into the site. You'll notice that this is a 23 case, so that staff has been working for quite a while with the applicant on this, and because of that, we actually reviewed it under the Mesa 2040 general plan, as the 2050 general plan was not yet adopted. In the 2040 general plan, the character area is mixed-use activity district with a regional scale subtype. The purpose of that district are large areas that, with substantial commercial development that attracts customers from a wide area to the site. It's primarily commercial with some supportive residential is permitted per the 2040 general plan. As I mentioned, there is a concurrent annexation request, and per state statutes, when the city annexes a piece of property, we have to assign a zoning designation to that, which is either comparable or less intense than the zoning designation in the county. In the planning department, we usually use the agriculture district as a kind of a placeholder zoning district, as it's our least intense zoning district. So this specific request would be a rezoning from ag to that limited commercial with a planned area development overlay. The LC district allows for all the commercial uses by right. That's your retail, restaurants, drive-throughs. The council use permit is specific to the multiple residence portion of the site. Commercial LC, you could do a certain percentage of residential uses by right in a commercial district, provided certain thresholds are met. And that is if you have a multi-building development, that 60% of the gross floor area of the entire development is reserved for commercial. And if within that you have a multi-story building, 65% of the ground floor of each of those buildings is reserved for commercial. There's also a density requirement in the LC district, which is 25 dwelling units per acre. If they are exceeding any of those, the mechanism for that is a council use permit. And this specific request relates to the commercial percentage, because when we get to the site plan, you'll see that the commercial portion is located on Signal Butte with 2 multiple residence developments behind that, which do not include commercial development. And the applicant is requesting a density of 35 dwelling units per acre for those multiple residence developments. They're also requesting a planned area development to allow modifications to specific development standards within the underlying LC district. As part of that council use permit, there are some specific approval criteria that the applicant needs to satisfy. I won't read them all to you, but staff did an extensive analysis on those and found that they did comply with all of those. There was one that was not applicable, and that's existing buildings on the site, and the site is vacant. But other than that, staff did find that they were compliant with all of the review criteria for a council use permit. Here you can see the site plan, and as Mary mentioned, there's kind of 2 requests related to the site plan. There's 3 parcels. Parcel A is the commercial with frontage on Signal Butte. Parcel B is the residential, which is actually to the east, so the top of this development is a conceptual site plan. The other multiple residence, which would face the US 60, is also a conceptual site plan, but the commercial development is a specific site plan for approval. In the planned area development section of the zoning ordinance allows for approval of conceptual site plans with the caveat that they still need to come back for specific site plan approval, which would be through the Planning and Zoning Board if no additional deviations are being requested. So when you look at parcel A specifically, there's a total of just over 300,000 square feet of commercial development, which includes a range, and I'll get into that on the next slide, the types of different development. They're also exceeding the parking by about exactly 140 spaces to accommodate restaurant users that have specific parking requirements. So looking at the specific site plan a little bit more, on the left, you can kind of see a breakdown of the different types of retail uses. So there are 2 major retail tenants, which total approximately 200,000 square feet, which are located adjacent to the US 60, so the south side of the site. There are 3 drive-throughs, 4 shops buildings, 2 commercial pads, a pickup window, 1 of the shops buildings with a drive-through, and 5 restaurants. There's also a bank with an ATM drive-up as part of this. And as Mary mentioned, staff and the applicant have worked extensively for many months on this site plan to really get the best site plan that we can for the city to demonstrate that level of quality. And I think that kind of shows itself in a few areas on the site plan. So first, if you look at the frontage of Signal Butte and Southern Avenue, there's a walking path, a jogging path that is separated from the sidewalk. So there's all the standard city infrastructure that goes in, half streets, curb gutter, sidewalks, all of those sorts of things. And then an additional walking path that transverses the site. It starts at Major A, follows all the way down Signal Butte and up Southern. And that is very intentional for 2 reasons. One, it provides an amenity for not only residents that might live in the multiple residents behind the commercial, but also just residents in the area. It also creates more of a separation from the street. It would be landscaped, so we have enhanced landscaping in those areas. You'll also notice just on the east side of Shops A, and then actually in a few other places in the site, there's some common open space amenities that are linked to that trail and the larger pedestrian network. And the idea behind that is to really create a pedestrian connectivity and pedestrian network that serves the whole development, because what we don't want are for these uses to feel bisected from each other. It's important to have that integration between the uses, and that's one way to do it. There's also, the colors bleed a little bit, but there's some red trees that you'll see at a variety of places on the site plan. Those are primary pedestrian connections that have larger sidewalks, and they're delineated. There's a hierarchy of pedestrian connections, and those are the primary ones that really funnel residents or commercial shoppers to and from the commercial to the north of that. In addition, kind of the two major parts I wanted to talk about is the restaurant galley, which is what the applicant is calling it, which is this kind of group of 5 restaurants right here just to the north side of the shops and the retail buildings. We spent a lot of time with the applicant on what does that look like. And there's enhanced pavement, and there's open space, and there's amenities that you'll see kind of in between these restaurants. And that really is kind of the heart of the development. And it brings people in, it gives them opportunities to eat and drink and hang out for a while in the development. And also, as part of this, the applicant provided design guidelines. And I think that's a really important part of this project, because with such a large site, you want to have a cohesive development, but you want to give a little bit of flexibility so that not every building is exactly the same, but there should be a general theme. And looking at well, it's a couple slides down, but looking at the design guidelines here, the theme is desert modern, which is, parapets, flat roofs. It's kind of a clean design, but really what makes it stand out are the architectural features. There's requirements for different types of architectural features, soffits and overhangs, shade trellises, awnings. There's a landscape palette. There's public art that's required for that restaurant galley portion specifically. There's color and materials, and staff spent a lot of time working on those design guidelines to make sure that the development is of a higher quality, but also integrates and is cohesive with each other. As I mentioned, there is also a PAD overlay. I won't get into all the deviations. They're in your staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions on specific deviations that you might have, but they're really related to the building and landscape setbacks, building separation, foundation base, parking requirements, and private open space. And as part of that PAD process, what we are really looking for is an increased level of quality. And those are some of the elements that I had mentioned previously, along with the design guidelines. Staff feels that that really ensures that we get an overall quality development. There was some extensive citizen participation as part of this. They reached out to property owners within 1,000 feet of the site. They held 2 neighborhood meetings. There were some concerns that were brought up by the residents, primarily traffic and an oversupply of drive-throughs and multiple residents in the neighborhood. One other thing I would like to point out really quickly on the drive-throughs, you will notice that there are a few of them, Pad J, Shop C, have drive-throughs that are adjacent to Signal Butte, but one of the areas that we really focused on the design guidelines is how do we visually mitigate that impact? And that's through canopies over the drive-throughs to make sure that it feels more like a building and less like a building with a drive-through on the front. There's enhanced screening requirements that are part of that. So that's another element that staff really worked on to increase the quality of the overall development. Staff does find that it complies with the 2040 Mesa General Plan, as well as Chapters 31 and 70 for a council use permit, and the PAD and site plan review sections of the zoning ordinance. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. The Planning and Zoning Board heard this at their December meeting. They also recommended approval with conditions by a vote of 6-0. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Thanks, Evan. And thank you for all the work on this. I don't know if this is working. Yeah, okay. I know you all have worked really hard. This came in, when I was sworn in 2023, this was already sort of rolling, and it came in as a big box, multifamily development already. And so I have worked over the last 2 years in collaboration with planning to really make it the best kind of place that we can make it, given the constraints of, yes, there is big box, yes, there's going to be there's going to be a lot of driving in here, people coming from off the highway and different areas. It's going to draw from a large area, but how do we create a place? And I think we've really done that on the north side of the parcel with the restaurant galley. That's going to be a unique space that we don't have in Mesa, with 5 restaurants that are sort of clustered like a mini downtown. And you all have done a great job of adding the pedestrian path, adding the art, adding the green open space on the northeast corner of the commercial space. I appreciate all that, because that connects, the connection between the multifamily and the commercial was very important to me, and I know you worked hard on that, and I think we've got the best pedestrian connections we can hope for at this point, given the underlying commercial space that it is. So anyway, I wanted you to give this presentation so that all the rest of the council can look at this. This is a large space. We're annexing a large piece of land, plus rezoning. So it's good that you all have all the details and ask all the questions that you need to ask. Now, I did want to mention, can I ask you one question really quick before I hand it over, Evan, on the slide, I don't know what this one, slide 8, where, of the site plan? What is 2 commercial pads? What areas are those?
Oh, here we go. So the commercial pads, so obviously the pads are standalone buildings, and there's shops, D up here, kind of right off of the main entry. Sorry, I don't know if you can see my mouse. So
Okay.
here's the primary entry. We have the shops building here, and we have shops F, which would be located just south of that, adjacent to the secondary entry on the site.
What
And-
about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, and those are just, they could be restaurants, they could be retail. What they don't have are any sort of drive-through facility.
What about Shop A? Shops A? Because it doesn't either.
You're correct. Shops A is a larger shops building, so yes,
B.
that
So-
would be a commercial pad adjacent to that open space.
So do we need to include those somehow? Or was this just for our information to say?
It's informational
Okay.
for you, just to kind of highlight some specific aspects of the site plan.
Okay, and then the other thing, I just wanted to make sure too, the one shop with the drive-through should actually be one shop with a pickup, right? That's what it is on the, I don't see your one shop with a drive-through. And there's a distinction, right? The reason
There
that-
is most definitely a distinction, and thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth. So we have Shop C here has a pickup window, and you're correct. This
So
is
that's a
Pad
typo.
J.
There's not really a
that
shop
is
with a
correct.
drive-through. Okay,
Correct.
just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I have a few more questions, but I just wanted to open it up to the rest of the council.
Absolutely.
Any more questions from council? Ms. Spilsbury?
So how many units, residential units are there?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. Those are still conceptual in nature,
Oh, okay.
but they are asking for an increase in the density up to 35 dwelling units per acre. So we are working through that. I can get you maybe the specific number of
Okay,
units.
so we
here.
don't know specifics on 2-story, 3-story, like there's nothing like that yet, or how many units, or?
Not yet. They will come back. So what we're looking at as far as the conceptual site plan is the general layout of the buildings, kind of how they function on the site. One thing I would note, though, if we look at Pad C up here that'd be the southeast corner of the site adjacent to the 60. One thing that I think is really important about this one specifically is you'll notice all the open space between the units and how all of that functions. So if council does elect to approve this and that conceptual site plan is approved, when they come back for a specific site plan, it needs to be in very substantial conformance with the conceptual site plan that was approved with regards to layout. And there are some parameters as far as overall density, parking calculations, and things like that, which will limit the number of units to some degree.
Is there an estimate of how many units? On the conceptual plan?
Yeah, so Pad B, which would be the one closest to Southern, is could be 4 stories in height. And I would note that one of the comments that we got back, the applicant got back when they went to the neighborhood, specifically the neighborhood on the north side of Southern was building height. So usually what we do in that scenario, planners kind of default to, we want buildings as close to the street as we can to kind of build that building wall. In this case, that building is set back a substantial amount. There are carriage units along Southern, which is a garage on the bottom and a living space on the top. So two-story units will have enhanced architecture on the southern frontage to kind of mitigate that. And conceptually, there would be a total of 649 units between both Pad B and Pad C.
And so everything that's, let's see, what direction is this? East, everything that's on that whole east section where you can see the pools, I'm guessing, all that's residential too?
Correct. So maybe a good slide to look at here. So where it has
Oh, there we
conceptual
go.
parcel
The
B. and-
parcel B and C,
and
not
parcel-
pad B and C.
I'm sorry, I
Parcel-
misspoke.
Okay, no,
Parcel B and
that's why
C.
I was got confused. Okay.
Thank you.
And then are we trying to park it at 2.1 or what's the goal here on parking since we're so far east out there?
Thank you, Councilmember Spilsbury. They are asking for a parking reduction on parcels B and parcel C, and they are parcel B is 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. Parcel C is 1.7 spaces per dwelling unit.
And is the assumption any overflow would just go into the commercial area?
That is definitely a possibility, but as these progress forward to specific site plan, we're going to require parking studies, very detailed
Okay.
analysis on
So
how that works.
those sort of details that I get really worried about aren't going to be figured out quite yet.
That's correct, but what I would say is if they come in with a specific site plan for parcel B or parcel C, and they're not in conformance with what we are looking at today, that's technically an amendment to the planned area development overlay. So if there are any new deviations, it's going to come back to council for your review.
To your question, if I may intercede, is how many are these are going to be one bedroom,
Well, right,
two,
that's-
three versus, what's that called, where there's no bedroom?
Yeah, thank you.
Studio, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Summers. That's a great question, and the developer is, to my understanding, still looking for specific users for these sites. So as that comes in, that's part of the math in this, is the unit mix and how that works, so that it works with the parking, and that's something staff is very aware of.
And Evan, you can have accommodation within a building that.
Oh, absolutely,
anticipated.
absolutely.
Right.
Can I just interject just a second? Because typically the issue we worry with parking is that it overflows into an area it's not supposed to be in, like a
Right.
residence. There, what is the issue here? There's no residence around
that's
here. Where do you
what's-
think it, you know what I mean?
No, so that's what I'm wondering,
Yeah.
if there is overflow, or is it just assuming into the commercial
Right,
parking lot?
and so we have to assume that the developer understands that, right? And has
Correct.
planned for that. That's
There's no
that's how I
residential on
propose
the
it.
other side yet, right? Like, I mean, it's just, that's on that very edge of town, so I mean. who
There
knows,
is a
but-
canal right there, so there is some.
Oh, on the east side?
Yeah,
Yeah,
on the
it's
east
It's
side.
on the edge of town to
so-
some of you.
Anyway,
So,
just
yeah,
to sort of,
okay.
I understand the parking
Yeah.
issue when it comes to other, close residents, but I think that's why the deviation,
Works
was.
on this.
Yeah.
So then I guess my other question, this is just such a huge property. Is the way to get to the residential part either coming off Southern and driving all the way to the back corner, or coming off of Signal Butte, going through the commercial area to get to that back? I mean, that just seems like such a far drive to get to your apartment in that back corner, but those are the only entrances.
Councilmember Spilsbury, that's correct. So parcel B has direct access to Southern. Parcel C has access, but it's through the main commercial development. And that is, if you look at the design of this, there are some elements there that it's kind of intentional. So we have enhanced landscaping along that kind of main drive, and it terminates into a roundabout. Because what we're not looking for is just kind of dead ends into an apartment complex. Here we have a design feature with a roundabout. So this was very intentionally designed to kind of give that corridor up to that specific pad parcel C.
Is the south little entrance there, is that an emergency? I don't know how to point to something on here.
Right in here?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that an emergency exit?
Correct. It's a secondary right behind the major A. It's
so
a
that's not an
fire
entrance
requirement.
for-
No.
Residents, okay.
And Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, that's actually where a lot of the loading and unloading will be for Target. So we wouldn't want to bring a lot of cars and people through that area to
Okay.
keep that area secure for that use.
Gotcha, okay.
Mr. Summers.
Actually, Mary just hit on a concern I have. First of all, this whole presentation, there's two elements to it. The presentation we've had so far has been on the site plan, and I completely understand that. The other part I know that staff has been working on, and Councilmember Goforth has been working on, is the quality of the retail development, and I haven't heard any of that yet. So I'm hoping that that's forthcoming in the discussion. As for the site plan, I think there's some very good elements to this. One is you rather separated some of the uses so they don't conflict, which is nice. So you have the restaurant row or galley, cute, with the big box being separate and then the residential in behind. One concern I do have on this is we tend to try to hide the back end of a store, which is unattractive typically, toward a freeway or something that's going to be hidden away where we're not going to see it. The other concern would be the noise from the backup buzzers that are OSHA required, so they're going to be backing up. And the back end of this major retail is backing up right up against the residential component. So how is the developer planning to mitigate the issues of the backup buzzer noise? And is there a 360-degree design for this store since it does faces a new residential component?
Mayor, Councilmember Summers, both great questions. I'll start with maybe the freeway side. So as part of the design guidelines, yes, four-sided architecture is the baseline for really all development in Mesa. Outside of this site, it's four-sided architecture. The purpose of the design guidelines is to kind of take that baseline and bring it up. So yes, we paid particular attention to the freeway side, and there are requirements for architectural features, materials, movement in the building that should really, obviously it's not the front of the building and it's not gonna necessarily have storefront, but it should look like that from the freeway side. So there's not, a ton of landscaping and things on that side. It's really the building architecture that is the prominent feature. And that's what the design guidelines help to ensure that we have a higher
I
level.
don't care about the AJ traffic coming by. I'm concerned about the residents.
Sure, and on the east side of that building, what you'll notice on the conceptual site plan is the amount of landscaping really kind of following from southern.
This one?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
this one
We're on
here.
the same page.
So if you look at all the landscaping from southern as it works its way down to the south, this is also an area that staff really focused on. And you can see the open space here and the additional landscaping with the trees. The parking area also helps to separate the back of house of the major tenants with the living quarters of the apartment. So I think between the combination of the landscaping and the distance between those, we feel pretty comfortable that we're mitigating that.
Julie's showing me her Target right up against
I'm
houses.
showing him that the Target by my house, there's houses
I don't want to
right on the
repeat.
other side of the wall.
I don't want to repeat bad
This
design.
looks way better. No,
Oh,
I
it
know.
does.
I'm
It
just saying
does.
with parking and all that
Yeah.
landscape, it would be a huge difference.
It does, and these look like owner occupied versus rentals, so that, the thing is, I don't, if this is a bad design, I don't want to repeat a bad design here. And so mitigating the issue with that, a noise problem, right? Echoing through some of the residential would be a concern. I'm not sure how to best address that other than the architecture and whatever. Also, is this 360 architecture and the increase in that we're talking about included in a development agreement with the quality of the design site?
Councilmember Summers, the design guidelines were recommended for approval by the Design Review Board. It's part of the zoning case. And that is going to run with all the development on the property. And to maybe back up just a second with your question on the loading, the truck loading specifically for Major A only occurs at the south side of the site adjacent to the US 60. So on this site plan here, you
Right.
can see that area is specifically recessed. And when we look at the maneuvering aisles for the trucks and how that works with the apartments, we've got quite a bit
What's
of
that
separation.
distance between the
The truck well and the apartments?
truck galley and the apartments? Do we know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it is a substantial distance.
Okay. All right.
Any more questions?
Nothing on the site plan, but I'm still waiting for the discussion of the quality.
To Mayor Freeman, Councilmember Summers, we are working on a development agreement as part of the rezoning process that looks at use restrictions. That development agreement will be coming at the same time as the zoning case.
2 weeks?
Right, for the
This is
final action.
introduction.
That's correct.
So we will have the DA prior to.
For the use restrictions, that's correct. So we're finalizing the use restriction development agreement now so that we don't get things like service stations and car repair and more drive-throughs. So that type of restriction on the uses for, similar to other use restriction DAs that we are working on, will be part of this zoning case. There is a second DA that I know we're still working on as it relates to the quality of the restaurants and the types of restaurants that are going in at Restaurant Galley. That will follow after the zoning case.
Why would we proceed for zoning without it?
So what I might do is I might ask if Maria is available to, oh,
So,
sorry,
you
Jim.
know, I'd like to know what we're getting, because this has been something the council member's been working on for quite some time and insisting on higher quality. I've heard stories that this might be happening, but I would like some guarantees, because we've seen it where we've advanced a case and embedded rights in a property, which right now is agriculture, and then have all those things fall far short of what our community is expected. So it seems premature to move forward without that DA. So why are we moving forward without, where's the DA? I want to see it.
Mayor and council, maybe I can answer that. Also, then Maria can jump in. The idea was this, is that, first of all, a lot of the quality is embedded in the design and in the site plan itself. And so they work together, both the DA and the plan, and the site plan and the rezoning. So you can't rely on one or the other totally. And so the idea was to separate the DAs into a use restriction DA and a incentive DA. Frequently, we do put them together in one, but the property owner is selling it to a developer. In order to facilitate that closing, we were willing to do a use restriction DA because we don't want to zone the property without the use restrictions. And so if you were to approve this in 2 weeks with a development agreement that has use restrictions, those use restrictions will then also record on the property, and the property will be restricted accordingly, like we do in many development agreements. And then the incentive development agreement, the developer is incentivized to want, they want that development agreement. They want to do it right now. And what will happen is they'll close on the property then will be owned by the developer. We'll enter into a incentive DA with the developer. That'll also record on the property. And the incentives will be for reimbursement for public infrastructure, subject to them putting the type of restaurants that we want to see and the development we want to see. Regardless, the development's going to be what you're seeing on this picture with this site, this kind of quality, right? We're trying to incentivize really sort of high-end users, right? Type of use, and so I'll let Maria talk about that, and that's the type of incentives. In order to enter into those agreements, you have to do certain studies and analysis, and then it takes, there's almost like another 3-month period. And so that would delay the ability for the developer to close on the property. And so that's why we looked at it as we're still protected because we get the use restriction DA recorded on the property, and they want the incentive DA, and we'll provide that 3-4 months from now when we have all the information to do that DA.
Well, and let me just also weigh in. Our incentives for development are performance-based. So just because we have an incentive DA, it's all dependent on the performance of the developer. The developer can choose not to pursue the incentive and develop something different, obviously in the context of what you're seeing here. But what we're trying to do is provide an incentive to perform, meaning to bring in a qualitative type restaurant, something that's unique, something that's local, a regional retail center, that we think is unique that justifies us providing a reimbursement for public facilities.
But there's a couple of things, sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but there's a couple of things to this. So not just encouraging to build that, but we are also granting through a CUP additional residential development opportunities that typically aren't there in an LC. And in exchange for that, was please bring a unique development, right? Do something different that we haven't seen in Mesa and be it unique. If we don't tie the development agreement, if we only tie it to incentives, they could build what I call just a traditional commercial strip and not bring that unique experience. Is that right? I mean, in exchange for 3 drive-throughs, which, as you heard Evan say, one of the major issues that the residents have was this is more drive-throughs. They already have 5 across the street. They said we don't need more. But the developer, I think, understood that and came up with a unique idea. But if there's no tie, they could build the 3 drive-throughs, scrap the galley, and call it a day. Is that right? And if that's right,
And is a
I'm not sure that's where we need to
be.
CUP for the added residential here necessary to move forward for the purchase of the property? We could hold back that CUP for the added residential bonus density, if you will, and they could still purchase the property and make the CUP a contingent upon delivering on the quality of the retail.
So let me first say, and I'll say what Chris said in a different way to try to answer your question, Councilmember Goforth, is even if we had one development agreement with use restrictions and incentives, and I'll simplify it, they could go build one of the drive-throughs and not build anything else. They just wouldn't get the incentives.
I understand that. I'm
So-
saying, how do we say this is tiered, right?
So that's true of every development agreement, is that it's incentive. In other words, they have an incentive to complete the development as we want it, but if they don't get the incentive. And so if we wait 3 months and do one development agreement and do one rezoning, the same scenario that you're saying is true, and that's true of every development. I'll say this, they can't just scrap, so you don't get to just, you have to come back to council if you want to do something other than what you're being shown here, on parcel A, right?
But Jim, the problem I have just conceptually is that we're gonna do a DA that's gonna do the prohibitions of things like gas stations or whatever. And that's great because it focuses on this. So you set a baseline, you got rid of bad, right? Or undesirable. It's not necessarily bad, we need gas stations, but it's undesirable in this location. We want excellence. The problem that I'm having is that in the middle is mediocrity, and that's what everybody seems to settle on. And I've seen this on other developments in my community, in every part of Mesa, where we say, you can't do this, this is what we're aiming for, and at the end of the day, we end up in the middle with meh. And I feel like we're setting the pins up for that kind of fall.
Well, what it
with
means,
this.
though, that's why, again, we can't, there's only a certain role we can play, and that we're trying to figure out is, and frankly, we're in competition with our surrounding communities, right? Because what we're finding out is developers are coming to us and saying, hey, and your surrounding community, this is what they offered me, the incentive, and I brought these XYZ retail experiences or whatever. And that's one of the things that came out in our retail coach study, is that we haven't been as aggressive in that area. And so we're trying to, again, try to achieve the goals that the council has established, that community desires, by saying, listen, you're gonna have to put in this infrastructure. And in this case, this is unique, maybe versus a lot of other developments, because it is currently a county island. There is not surrounding infrastructure. There's not the sewer lines, the built-out roads. And so there's a higher investment of public infrastructure around this area, because the city did not build that out around this property because it was in the county. So there's a significant overhead of infrastructure to make this development work. So this developer recognizes that they've got a lot of expenses that they would have to spread across this entire development. But yet, if they can perform, and they brought to us names and ideas, and we're specifically identifying the quality of the restaurants, the quality of the regional attractions, that if they perform that, they'll get reimbursed for that infrastructure.
But Chris, we've done this in the past, and it doesn't always turn out. Even though we've given incentive, it doesn't always equate. It's the carrot or the stick, right? And I tend to lean to the carrot, right? Hey, we're gonna rebate, we're gonna give you the money for all the infrastructure
Well, they have
you've
to
put
earn
in,
it
but
back,
it
right? Remember,
absolutely.
there's no,
But we've also done agreements where you do, once you hit X% of a certain type of building, you have to do Y, right? We just did it in Fiesta. So that's what I'm saying. Can we say, once you do 2 drive-throughs, you gotta do 1 sit-down, or something like that, that
Oh, I see.
guarantees us a little bit more of the reason that we're even approving this annexation and rezone. Annexation that we don't have to do as a city, right? We're taking on
Right.
this additional long-term burden.
I think Councilmember-
And why
Yeah.
not?
So I think the way the incentive that we're working on actually kind of goes to that point, because it says you have to build out a certain type of retail experience and have that completed before you have the opportunity to receive reimbursement, right? And then once that's completed, help me out here, and then we open it up for the opportunity on the restaurants. Like, so many restaurants have to be completed before you can get reimbursement for the next available group of sales tax. So what we're trying to do is focus on the things we really want, right, with the limitations on everything else. So,
I guess I'm looking at things like, if it becomes more profitable to put in 3 more drive-throughs, then getting those incentives back, they're gonna do it.
I don't think the way our structure is, that with the incentive, that means they would be foregoing significant reimbursement of public infrastructure.
Right.
So that is theoretically possible, your point, but the amount of, the lucrative of that drive-through would have to be so significant to be
You don't
able
think
to
it'll become
reimburse
close?
millions of dollars of infrastructure.
Okay.
I don't see that happening. I think the incentives that we have are very directed at the experiences we want, and the only way they get the reimbursement is they have to deliver on those experiences, those types of retail, because they're going to be fronting, right, all that infrastructure. We're not financing the infrastructure, so they from day one have to build out the sewer and the roads and everything. So they're going to have all that expense on the front end before anything gets weighed in.
And Mayor and Council, if I can, if you'll remember, we are doing that USDA, and that USDA does restrict it to 3 drive-throughs.
Good point.
So that, if they want to do more than 3 drive-throughs, they would have to modify that DA. They're also tied to the site plan, and anything that is modified from the site plan, if it's a major modification, has to then be reapproved. So there are.
By council.
That's correct. If
Major-
they follow the site plan, they have to go through planning and zoning. If they change it, they have to come back to council. So there are these other triggers that bring it back to council. And that DA limiting the number to 3 is really important, so they cannot have more than 3 drive-throughs, so that if something happens, that middle restaurant galley cannot become drive-throughs unless they change that DA.
Or come back to.
Or come back to council to change that DA.
Yeah, and that's, and if I may, Mayor, that's,
Go ahead and finish, then I want to go over to economic development.
actually, let's hear from economic. Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
She's been sitting there patiently want to answer your
She's
question.
gritting her teeth.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor and council members. As Mr. Brady was mentioning, we are working on this in reimbursement DA. The developer is very committed to bringing in the brands that we want. We just need a little bit more time to finalize the information, and then we're working, obviously, with the city attorney's office. There is another process to go through when you do a reimbursement development agreement, so we're looking to do that as well with the noticing and obviously the studies and everything that have to accompany it. But the developer is very committed to bringing in the brands that we've been talking about, these first of their kind in Mesa brands, which would be very exciting, higher level sit-down restaurants, such as with the Restaurant Galley. They also were not very excited about going forward with this without the incentive DA, because they are looking at that as their their incentive to do all of the heavy lift, which is that public infrastructure that is required for this site. So they are trusting us to go forward and allow them to close escrow so that they can get the property in their names, and then we can finalize the incentive DA with them. And with that, I'll let Kelly speak a little bit, too.
Can I just say really quick, I'm just going to put this out there as far as the council. Every developer is very excited to do that when they come in and ask for a rezone. We are trying to put in guardrails for 2 years, 3 years down the road when they're not so excited anymore. So just so we all understand that right now it's great. They want to do this, we want it done. This is about looking long-term and making sure that we're protecting the quality of development in our city. That's what this is about, so just so you know.
Yeah,
No,
and I don't think we disagree, and we're always trying to find ways to get to what we're all trying to accomplish. And again, I'll say it again, we have found that one of the greatest motivations for developers is money. And when, I know it's surprising. What? I know, it took me 19 years to figure this out, but I thought it was just altruistic and they were just trying to do things best for the community, but money does have something to do with it. Again, I will say, this is a site that is, because it is not in the city today, the surrounding infrastructure, the roadways, the sewer line terminates right at the corner of this property, and it doesn't come across. So even before they can even pull a permit, right, get a certificate of occupancy to occupy this, what's the number we're working at, the upfront utility cost right now, and the road, the infrastructure, what number are we doing?
It's around $8 million, actually.
$8 million. So we think that there's a motivation that once they've had to put that investment in, because once they put that in, now they're highly motivated to recover that cost as quickly as possible. And maybe Kelly can speak to it. That's the framework of this development agreement, is this idea that you need to build out things, open them up so that you can get that incentive sooner and keep performing, and again, go to the next phase, build out another section, and then get reimbursement. So,
Mr. Brady, just on that point, though, the cost of the infrastructure, isn't that going to be well covered by the additional density that's allowed here and the fact that there's a big box? Because we've seen developments before.
Let me be clear. The infrastructure reimbursement that we are providing, this is unlike the car dealership, does not extend to the infrastructure supporting the residential.
Okay, that's an important piece of information. Thank you.
Okay, maybe you can.
Sure,
explain
yeah.
better.
Good morning, Kelly Whittemore with the Deputy City Attorney. So the way this is structured, this is a retail sales tax incentive agreement. One of the big reasons that we weren't able to bring it forward to you as a part of this zoning is because of the statutory requirements that go with that. We have to bring it to council ultimately for 3 separate meetings because we have to give extra notice to the public that we're going to look at these types of agreements. We did one last year related to the auto malls. If you remember that, Mr. Adams, we will bring you up to speed on that. But when we do these particular types of agreements, we also have to have an independent third-party economist review the numbers to make sure that what we have run actually will end up being a true benefit for the city. So that also adds to that time frame of why they're talking about this is an extra 3 or 4 months versus what the developer needs right now in terms of being able to close. But in terms of what the actual retail sales tax incentive agreements look like, so the structure of this one will generally be to incentivize high-end retail. It will also incentivize the restaurant row and specific types of restaurants going into restaurant row in order to receive that. There'll be specific conditions precedent that you have to meet those in order to receive any of the benefit that they would ultimately want. So if we're looking at $8 million, which is what the number we're talking about right now, those conditions precedent must be met before you would be even eligible to receive $1 of that. That's the structure that we're working on right now, but we're still working on negotiating.
My
That's not
my
a whole lot
concern.
different than what we did with car dealerships.
This is almost the exact same
Yeah,
type
and I
of
don't
deal
want
we
to get
did
too
with
much into those details because that wasn't put in the agenda and I don't have those documents to, 1, to discuss it, and 2, nobody else has seen it. So, but my concern would be if we add to the, I know the residential isn't part of the forthcoming development agreement, but when you add units, that adds money in the pocket of the developer. When you put in a big box retail, that's money in, that's why they're doing this, right? And that's fine, but if we're trying to incentivize the higher quality stuff, the stuff that costs a little bit more money, and even though it's not part of it, if they've made money because we've already given them the stuff that really generates revenue, big box and more residential, that kind of decreases the motivation to try to go out and do the hard thing. So that's a concern. Secondly, this developer have any experience in putting in high-end retail like what's being talked about here? What's the background generally for this
Yes.
developer? Because I don't know who it is.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Summers. First, I wanted to clarify that the developer we're talking to with respect to this incentive reimbursement is only looking at doing the commercial. They will not be doing any of the residential, so none of the residential will be
Okay.
part of this at all. This developer does have experience. It's working in doing this something very, very similar to this in Surprise. It is just opened. The idea with the restaurant galley with high-end retail, high-end restaurants. So they do have experience with this, and they're trying to duplicate what success they've had in Surprise here in Mesa.
Surprise, not Peoria?
Nope, Surprise.
Surprise, because is that two different developers, the Surprise versus the Peoria one?
It's two different developers,
Yeah,
yes,
okay. So
yes.
so I can look up the Surprise one?
Yes,
when you
it's
send me who that
Prasada.
is?
I'll tell you.
Not right here. Okay.
And Councilmember Summers, if I can, just related to the residential and getting that high-quality development, that is one of the reasons we worked on those design standards and guidelines, so that when they come in, they still have to go through site plan review, they still have to go through design review, so that we make sure that
No, I understand that
quality
process.
development is occurring in those residential areas.
Okay, for me, it's more of the bonus intensity, we'll call it. I'm just gonna say, we're gonna add residential. There's already a lot of rental in this area. So this is gonna increase that number. And if we're gonna allow that, and it's gonna increase the percentage of rentals in this area too. If we're gonna allow that, we wanna see, the neighborhood's gonna wanna see something special. The community's gonna wanna see something special here. So I think that added residential, the CUP for that really should be the carrot, one of the carrots that we hand over for the higher quality development.
Yeah, the
that
problem
comes
is
in
they're two separate developers right now,
yeah.
right? So the commercial developer is not doing the residential, he's just commercial. And that's typically what
Yeah, but
we've
it's one landowner. So at the point that
typically-
we're at right now.
so but we're not extending the reimbursement incentive to the landowner, right, that's currently today.
Correct.
So the way we looked at it, frankly, is we tried to separate out
I
the
see, yeah.
residential, so it didn't have the benefit of the incentives that we were giving to the commercial developer. And so we wanted to focus just on, and it's not the big box that's getting the incentive, right? It's a specialty retail store that's large, but it's unique, and there isn't one in Mesa today. And the uniqueness of the restaurant. So we are meeting specifically with a commercial developer who has experience doing this and has letters of interest from the specialty retail. So that's the way we're focusing only on the commercial with this. What happens on the residential side, I think this developer is interested because that's, potential customers close by. But frankly, the types of development or commercial development that we're pushing towards are regional, attractions, not neighborhood local attractions.
And there might be more questions on this, Mayor, but since this is introduction, I'm comfortable with the introduction, but I'm gonna wanna see some more detail over the course of the next 2 weeks while we're having some meetings to see. And I wanna make sure that the council member for the district is comfortable with the direction this is heading, because this is an important project on a key parcel of land, and there are not very many opportunities left for high-quality development. I've said that over and over again, and this one being near some commercial development to the south of this, this area already attracts a lot of traffic. It's on a major freeway, right in the middle of all the important growth that's going on in the Southeast Valley. It's gonna be in the middle of the world here before long. So I want to make sure that we get this right, that the developer is successful, that the restaurants are successful, and everybody in the community is happy with it.
Well, let's move over. Ms. Duff, do you have some questions?
Just a couple of simple questions. First of all, we're requiring that the retail is built first before the residential, is that correct?
Not necessarily, we're working with the commercial developer first. The residential is still to be
Yes.
Is that developer still to be defined?
It is.
Yeah.
That development
So
is
it's just
still.
happening, we're not required, it's the way it's happened, which is unique, right? Because typically, a master developer will oftentimes lead with residential, and then what happens is they keep going and we lose the commercial. One of the reasons we're very optimistic about this is we're only dealing with the commercial developer who is not doing the residential. And so we are very focused on the fact that this, we call it parcel A, this part on the bottom is only going to be commercial. There's not an opportunity for them to go, well, I tried and worked so hard at it, but now I have to put in more multifamily. That is not the intention here.
Okay, and then the second question is this middle section on the residential area, that is part of the conceptual B or C? I have to go back to the. C. But that is included as in a conceptual parcel. It's not part of the commercial.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, that's correct. The commercial portion is a site plan, a detailed site plan. That's what would be approved. And then the two residential portions are still conceptual.
Okay, so that middle section is part of a conceptual parcel C or B.
That's correct. It's part of parcel C, I believe, or C, I believe. I always get the numbers backwards,
Okay,
or
all
letters
right.
backwards. Yes,
Okay, so it's
that would
not
be
the
part of the
immediate- part of the
residential.
immediate
That's
site.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Heredia, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Can I just clarify? I thought, yeah. Mary?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I thought at some point we did discuss the commercial being done before the residential. So that is not a part of
That is
DA or anything?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, that is not a requirement of the approval. At this point, that's kind of the sequencing. We've got the.
It's happening, it
Yeah, it
seems
is
like.
happening.
I get that, but, okay.
And that's why it's
But
been helpful for us to, in the DA, we can just focus on the commercial.
Yeah.
And we're trying to separate out, the reimbursement that might benefit the residential, trying to make sure we
Yeah.
draw
Okay.
that line.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just two quick questions. I'm assuming that economic development is supportive of this as proposed?
Yes, we are. This project will be the first major catalyst that brings to light our quality retail attraction strategy, and we're very excited to have this opportunity.
Okay, supportive without conditions or recommendations at this point, just as presented?
Well, we've been working very closely with planning on this, so I would say we are in supportive of the recommendations that planning has proposed.
As it progresses?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
second question. Do we have a rough idea of what the TPT, or otherwise known as sales tax, this will generate once it's fully online?
Yeah, Council, that's what we're going to be bringing back in that other
Oh,
DA,
right.
is that's the
Okay.
analysis we have to do. Because
Understood.
part of that is that's the that's the incentive, right, is that how much sales tax will this generate? How much is the city willing to share or make available for the reimbursement? So how much will we keep regardless, and how much can they use for the reimbursement? And we're going to work through all those calculations and bring those to council.
Okay.
And we have an outside consultant that has to review that for us.
Yeah, and Councilmember Adams, the outside consultant, their report, we actually include as a part of the Legistar items that we put in for the development agreement. So you'll get to actually see the numbers and their analysis on that.
Okay, thank you. And actually, one final question. I can see this from above. Is there a similar development that the architectural style would mirror that you could refer me to, that I can kind of picture in my mind? What is this going to look like?
Mayor,
not, no
Councilmember
problem.
Adams, what we can do is let us come up with some ideas, and we can get those over to you
Yeah.
and Mayor Beth.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm looking at something like, I won't mention a bunch of things, but just something I could drive by and go, okay, this is what it's going to look like.
That's fair.
We
Good,
can do
thank
that.
you. Thank you, Mayor.
Wasn't there a development surprise like this, is what you're talking about?
Yeah, we can get
So
some
that's
elevations
something
and
comparable?
stuff, yeah.
Correct,
We
yes.
could take a road trip?
Yeah.
if we want.
Yeah, we could.
Or we could send you photos, either way, whatever.
I will say that Mary and her team have done a really great job of making it even better than what is in Surprise in terms of our design guidelines. So you could see what I would consider a lower level of what this project is going to look like if we were to go to Surprise.
Okay, thank you. Just listening to the overall discussion on this, I think the applicant gets some messaging here about where we're going here. And And I like the performance metrics here and guardrails, as Councilmember Goldforth talked about, because we do need to make these high-end. We need to raise the level of what we're building today in Mesa. So I find this very important. And even in the noise issue that Councilmember Summers brought up, maybe some noise attenuation or study can be done on that.
So actually, Mayor Freeman and Councilmember Summers just walked out. We have that distance from the residential to that loading dock area. It's about 260 feet to the residential.
That's quite a
to the-
distance
yeah.
instead of over the block fence.
That's
As
correct.
Ms. Spilsbury talked about, you know. So, yeah, okay, well, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move on to other agenda items.
So we have, you're gonna stay, they're gonna stay. 'Cause
Yeah,
we're gonna
I'm
go
sure
to
9A, 9A.
Nine?
9A. I know, we're taking up a lot of time with my agenda items. I don't know, I assume you all you wanted to hear this because I know that citizens,
Yeah,
okay,
they'll be-
okay, great,
I have another question on the agenda, but this is.
okay.
Now, I'm going to just throw some out. We kind of have a hard stop around 9:15. We have to travel to another function, be there by 10. 9:20.
That's, all right, yeah, no, well, you're pushing it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We have to go all the way out to Councilmember Summers' district, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starts at 10.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay, proceed on. 9A.
Thank you, Mayor Freeman, council members. The next presentation that we have is for a project called Carmelo. This one is also in District 5, and Evan will go through some of the details, and then we're happy to answer any of the questions that you have.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As Mary mentioned, this is for a development called Carmelo, ZON 23-01003. This is also an annexation request, so your rezoning request will again be from that agriculture district to RS-15 with a planned area development overlay, and this would be to allow a single residence development. The subject property is crosshatched on this map here. We're located on the south side of McDowell, east of Hawes, in District 5. The general plan, this one is also reviewed under the 2040 general plan. This is in the Desert Uplands area, and just to give a quick refresher on what Desert Uplands is, this is the far northeast portion of Mesa. It's located north of University. The western boundary is the Cap Canal, and that goes out to the city limits. As everybody knows, this is a very beautiful part of the city, lots of natural desert, and it's really committed to preservation of that natural desert landscape, and that can be accomplished in one of two ways. The first way is large lots with preservation, building envelopes on each lot to maintain that character. Or you could do smaller lots with common open space to maintain that lower density feel and character. RS-15 is the most dense district that the general plan would support, so you can't do RS-6 or RS-7 or small lots like that. One thing I would note, if you look at the map here, the areas in that lighter yellow color are within the county. There's large county islands in this part of the city. And one of the reasons that smaller lots down to RS-15 is feasible is that the developer has to put in all of that infrastructure, all of the sewer, all of the water. And while there are larger lots in here, they may or may not have all the city utilities. A lot of the lots out here could be on septic, which requires a larger lot because you've got that system and you have the leach field and you just need more space to do that. So that's one of the reasons that sometimes the lots in the county are larger, not always, but sometimes they can be larger. As I mentioned, the request is from ag to RS-15 with the planned area development. And it's kind of like we talked about on the last case, the planned area development requires an increased level of quality. And I think that really shows itself in two primary ways in this site. The first is open space. So it's relatively speaking, it's a small site. It's about 28 acres. And of that, 22% is reserved for open space. So I think the number is important, but then also if you look at the site plan, kind of how they configure the open space is also important. There's increased setbacks, landscape setbacks along Hawes. And then if you look interior to the site, there's landscape tracks between the units. So there's no scenario in here where two lots share a rear lot line, which although the lots might be a little bit smaller, they feel larger because you're not directly adjacent to a neighbor in the back. The other area that really demonstrates increased quality are the building elevations. This is Blandford development, and there are 65 lots within that. There's a total combination of 47 site plan or floor plans and elevations that could be possible for this development. And just, I don't have all of the elevations, but just to give you kind of an idea of what they look like, they're increased as far as the materials, the architectural detailing, pavers for the driveways. So the actual product themselves are an elevated product. And between the open space and the products themselves, that really, in staff's mind, demonstrates that increased quality to justify the PAD. Again, there are a number of deviations. They're in your staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions council might have on those specific deviations. I won't get into all of them, but they are related primarily to lot size. You will note that the smallest lot is 10,400 square feet. But when you look at the site plan, the developer took great care to put larger lots on the perimeter of the site so that those lots feel larger, maybe slightly more compatible with the surrounding development, while the smaller lots are internal to the site. There's also a condition of approval, I'll talk about it in a little bit, that the Planning and Zoning Board added that requires single-story development on both Waterbury, which is the eastern boundary of the site, and Culver, which is the southern boundary of the site. So those will be restricted to single-story development. There has been extensive citizen participation and neighbor interest in this case. There were 2 neighborhood meetings in January and April of last year. And as a result of that, this plan has gone through a number of iterations. Again, staff and the applicant have worked closely to get the best plan that we can. This started out at actually 84 units at a density of almost 3 dwelling units per acre. The applicant heard the concerns from the surrounding development and worked to reduce that number of units. We're down to 65 units at 2.27 dwelling units per acre. And just as a frame of reference, they are asking for RS15, and the density in the RS15, although the lots are slightly under, is 2.9 dwelling units per acre. So there are some smaller lots, but overall the density with that increased open space brings that below the RS15 threshold. They also worked with the neighboring properties, and early iterations of the plan had the primary entry onto Haas Road. That was a concern for residents in the area. The applicant reworked the plan so that now the primary access is onto McDowell Road. There is a secondary emergency only access onto Haas, but the primary ingress and egress for the site is off of Haas Road.
McDowell.
I'm sorry, McDowell. Previously Haas, currently McDowell. Again, the density at 2.27 is under the density for RS15, and it's consistent with the developments in the surrounding area that are within the city. There are a number of developments. Blandford is the majority of those developments. It is consistent with that overall density, and the applicant has worked extensively with neighbors to try to tailor this as much as they can to the surrounding developments. Staff does find that this complies with the Mesa 2040 general plan as well as the applicable sections of the zoning ordinance. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. The Planning and Zoning Board recommended approval with conditions by a vote of 6-1, again with that added condition of approval to limit the homes along Culver and Waterbury to single-story development, to single-story units. And with that, I'm trying to keep it brief, but I'm happy to answer any questions that council might have.
You guys go ahead.
Evan, did you pull up the slide to show, I mean, this is in the county island today, but how we're looking at surrounding developments that are in the city to try to be similar to those, we're trying to use that as a standard. So
Yes.
I think that this is important, right? That, because the council heard a lot of comments from individuals who don't live in the city, who live in the county, and certainly they have different standards and the densities are gonna be materially different because suspect most of them are on septic tanks and they don't have, so they have to have the larger lot. So obviously this is different. So that was not our standard. Our standard says what are their proximate, is that comparable developments in this area, and looked at those densities. And I think that's important too, because we're trying to encourage, we want closed loop systems on sewers up here. And we want to be able to provide the utilities to them. Yet that then necessitates me a little bit higher density than, well, it does require a density different than septic tanks. So anyway, I just want to show you that I think the developer and staff tried to bring this in the context of other developments that are on city infrastructure, what they look like.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Yes, that's correct. So here you can see on the right, we have a chart of some neighboring developments, the acreage, the number of units and the dwelling units per acre. You can see where they're located on the map. So yes, the densities vary a bit, but this is consistent with the overall density. I would also note that this is the smallest development on the list. A lot of these are many hundreds of acres, whereas this one is just under 29 acres.
Ms. Pillsbury, did you have a question?
I was trying to figure out on this map where the location was. Haas and
So this would be
I.
the
Okay,
orange
gotcha.
one right here, yes.
Okay. I just can't tell from the map, but are these like, it seems like kind of a short driveway. Is it a bigger yard or is it still kind of a smaller backyard? And also my other question was, are these normal street sizes? They don't, on here, it doesn't look like it would provide street parking or that there would be room for that because it just looks like 2 lanes back and forth. So those were my questions. Oh, Sean's back there showing me that.
I'm going
Anyways.
to go back to the site plan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. So on the street widths, they are private streets, so they're not going to be city-maintained streets. They are generally consistent with our public street cross-section, what those would be like. The driveways, we have front setback requirements. The driveways will accommodate 2 cars if needed.
He's telling me the measurements with his hands back there. Okay.
Would the mayor entertain?
And I know I have a meeting on this property with Mr. Lake, so I guess I can get into the weeds on that later, but.
Did you say, sorry, I zoned out for a second. Did you say? I know, I think, Sean, you told 36 feet?
35.
35, okay, from curb to curb for the street. That's
So
huge.
that should be
Yeah.
plenty of room to have visitor parking on the
Correct.
street, yeah.
Well,
okay.
allows for
Most
parking.
important that we can get a fire truck and a
Well,
garbage truck.
of course, but we know how
just
some
need
of
a
these
bulldozer.
developers make things so tight that then there's no
I
room
know,
for it.
And they've added sidewalks, just FYI.
Oh, they have
That-
added
mhm,
sidewalks,
they've
okay.
added some
You
sidewalks.
just can't tell
it's
at
just
all
blocked
from
out,
this, yeah, like where there would actually be a yard or a driveway or a sidewalk or
And
anything
Mayor,
like that.
Councilmember Spilsbury, the reason for that is this is just a rezoning at this point. Because then it'll be platted and each individual property owner will,
But the
build based
number
on
would
that plat.
stick to 65
that's correct.
That
It will be
number wouldn't
platted to
change
that number. That's
necessarily.
correct,
Okay.
Councilmember Spilsbury.
in the rezoning. You have this specific number of plat, okay. Okay, I think that was my only question. It's exciting to see single-family homes, honestly, because we just get bombarded with multifamily, so yay.
Mary, you have any more
No.
comments? Councilmember, go for it. Mr. Richard, or Adams, sorry.
I know who you meant.
Slip like that.
I'm just curious, there was one dissenting vote at Planning and Zoning. Do you recall the reasons for the dissent concerns?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Freeman, Councilmember Adams. It was one of the council members who thought that the density and the size of the lots was incompatible in that neighborhood.
Thank you.
And I guess I would say, Councilmember Adams, if you look at as Chris alluded to, if you look at the surrounding county, it is a significant difference. But it was important that we looked at what other city developments had done and really, not that we disregarded the county altogether, of course not. This is still all in the desert uplands, so that does have guidelines for low density. But as you can see, it is a little bit higher than most of the others, but it's not radically different, which is, so we're moving upwards a little bit, but it's certainly not a significant difference and change. So it's still single, it's not a multifamily, it's not a grocery store, it's still a single-family development, which is really compatible with this area, so.
And Councilor, this
Thank
is
you,
the same developer that's done some of these examples that we're showing too.
Yeah.
Have you done a few of these too?
Yeah, he has.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, it's not a concern of mine. I was just mainly curious what the basis of the dissenting vote was, but understand, thank you.
I might add one more thing. You'll probably hear some traffic concerns, from the residents, but this road, McDowell, I have some numbers. There's about, Maricopa County did a count, it was about a 4,100 vehicles per day on this. It holds about 12,000. So
It's just a big change from what's
it's
there today.
it's only 65
Yeah,
homes,
but
so it's not
for
a,
someone who- yeah.
you know what I mean? I wouldn't even put
That's
it
fair,
in big
that's fair.
change category. It will be a change.
It'll be a
There
change,
will be
that's fair,
cars
that's
that
fair.
aren't there and guests that come, you know, that don't live there as well. So it will be a change, but it's 65 homes is not a significant change.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, that's correct. We use a average of 10 trips per day for single-family homes. So for reference, if you go to the grocery store and back, that's 2 trips. So adding 650 trips to both either Hawes or McDowell is negligible in terms of impacts, in our opinion.
Any more questions from council?
No, I would just direct everyone's attention to item 7C on here, which I'll just tell you what it is. It's a rezoning and annexation case in Maricopa County, which takes large lots, the sale of some large lots, and it's replacing them with a bit higher density of homes. So we're seeing a transition in this area. It needs to be compatible. I have no issue with this, by the way, so if there's an attorney in here representing this case, this is not an issue, I'm just drawing it as an example of what's going on. But that case does, if you look across the street from it when you're doing your review, does show a higher density of homes, so it's appropriately located. I wouldn't recommend this product here, but we're seeing this transition of areas, and it is a balance between transition, making sure that we have housing, and particularly housing attainable housing, and housing for ownership. We need to see more ownership housing. But also that it fits in an area and it fits the character of the neighborhood. So it's a delicate balance to make sure that we get this right. So I'm very interested to see what happens on Monday and what the comments are.
And just along those lines,
Yeah.
Scott, this one came in as a rental development, and kudos to the developer. We talked about the need for more ownership, especially since there was primarily right adjacent to it, you know, ownership in the county, and that we don't have a lot of that denser owner occupied, and they complied and moved it to owner occupied. So I think it's important when you have those conversations and you can see that transition.
People need a place to live, people need a place to own. So, thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you. I want to jump back to 9A and B and just talk about I think some of the neighborhood concerns is about the preservation of the flora and fauna, the desert uplands, and the way those are done. I think that needs to be relayed to them about the preservation of the desert uplands and the low lighting as well. I know they're not happy with the amount of homes being put on the properties, but kudos to planning and zoning about requiring the single-story homes around the outside streets. And I know Mr. Blandford builds it's going to be a nice addition to the neighborhood. With that, is there anything else from the council? On this one? Okay. 7C, did you cover that one?
Oh, yeah, I was just bringing it up as an example. Also, we're getting that text from the airport.
What, is there an aircraft coming in? Okay. Anything else on the agenda? Ms. Pillsbury.
I wanted to ask a fiber question, but I noticed I think Ian left, so I don't know if.
Ask it, we'll get an answer for you.
Okay, well, I noticed we're approving 2 more users. And I kind of just wanted to get like a feel for what our requirements are for these fiber companies as far as what they're doing to people's yards,
Right,
cleanup.
now these are unique because they're only serving the data centers, but I think
Oh, okay.
they're not residential.
Okay. I tried to like read through to see and I was just confused,
Yeah,
so.
these are
Okay, so these will be
uniquely
different.
serving
I'm
the
just,
data centers.
on social media and emails and talking to different people, I just keep hearing some problematic things that are
and I
happening
think
with fiber
Mr.
and.
Linson can provide, we're working on some more transparent, more information to get out there so he can know who to contact. But that's a different subject. We'll provide
Okay.
some information for that.
I
to
just
council.
wanted to like get a feel for that before we approved more, but I guess
Yeah.
if these are totally different, then
They are.
I can wait and talk to Ian. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, We've got some action items, appointments to council committees and regional boards. All of you have had an opportunity to look at the memos put out. I know that we're going to make a switch here between Ms. Spilsbury and Mr. Reddy. Mr. Reddy, Vice Mayor, do you have any other comments prior to this discussion?
No, I'm okay with the change.
You're okay with the change, thank you. Okay, we'll need to make a motion for these, this appointments and then,
What is the change? I'm sorry, I didn't.
yeah, we're gonna, Julie, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve that Frankie, Councilor Heredia and I are going to switch the United Food Bank and Idea Museum.
Just switching the two. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion approves. We'll need a motion to acknowledge receipts and minutes of various board and committee meetings. Is there a motion? Thank you. Second? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. And then how about current events and summary? Have all of you been busy the last 2 months, month and a half? Holidays? Ms. Pillsbury?
I know, I'm gonna go just, I know we're trying to get out of here, but we have time, and I don't want to gloss over some really great events that have happened in the city, so. Let's see, I got to host a Daisy Troop from Johnson Elementary, showed them City Hall and talked about local government. Councilmember Goforth and I were able to do the Red Mountains Multicultural Generational Center.
Mayor's Youth Committee.
Mayor's Youth Committee there. We got to talk to them and that was fun. And then the Idea Museum opened back up. So they have a new exhibit, Joyride exhibit, and that opened back up almost a month ago now. But since we haven't met, I wanted to make sure people were aware of that, a really fun new exhibit over there. And some pretty drastic changes to the Idea Museum already have happened, so it's worth going to see. On the 17th, I was able to attend a recognition for a student at Porter Elementary School who saved another kid's life at lunch, a third grader. You might have seen that in the news. Really, really sweet story, and that was a fun event to be a part of. And then also that morning, we had our great Blue Santa event where the police bring in their Santa dressed in blue on the helicopter. The kids go absolutely crazy, and FedEx and the Mesa Police Association provided all the toys for that event, so I wanted to thank them. Lots of us were at the Whittier Elementary. Our IT department gave them $12,000 to their school, and that was a really great event, and super excited to be able to support Whittier Elementary from our IT department. And then I guess last I'll talk about, we did the United Food Bank food distribution for Christmas, and we served 1,345 families that morning. So just love that we partner with United Food Bank in doing that over at the Convention Center, and I think it's really great for our community. I'll stop, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Pillsbury. Mr. Summers?
I'll just bring up, we've had a number of graduations. New firefighters have graduated, new paramedics have hit the streets, even though I think they still have to take their National Registry exam. If they haven't already, best of luck to everybody. It's not the easiest to get through. So congratulations. I'm very much looking forward to those folks hitting the streets because public safety is our number one concern, and one of our objectives is to have fully staffed police and fire departments. So having those graduations is important. I even had the opportunity to speak to one. I was fairly brief.
You were, you did
Weird,
good.
right?
Yeah.
So thanks to that. Also, I'm just going to shout out, my last thing is just a shout out today. Gulfstream will be holding its ribbon cutting today, which is the meeting that we're going to here in a little bit. Hundreds of new jobs in manufacturing on the airport. So kudos to now Mesa Gateway Airport. I think it's important to say that we have dropped the Phoenix moniker. It's time for us to walk on our own. Fly on our own, fly on our own.
There you go.
And so it is now the Mesa Gateway Airport. Congratulations, Mr. Brady. I know that was a battle, and we're going to go celebrate a little bit of jobs and economic success here in probably about 10 minutes. Mayor?
I don't know. Any other comments? Ms. Goforth, Mr. Adams? Ms. Duff?
Yes, I want to mention a few things that were significant and during the break. I wanted to acknowledge Crime Prevention Officer Amy Saylor at Fiesta PD. Annually, she puts on this event at the Mesa Arts Academy, part of the Boys and Girls Club in the same place. Gifts for the students there, they're low income, underprivileged. She brings in Santa. It's a huge undertaking every year, and she pulls it off. And I just wanted to acknowledge her generosity in serving these kids. I want to say that we had our first New Year's Eve in downtown Mesa on December 31st, and the diving lady came to help us on the countdown by diving into 2025. Thank you to DMA, the Downtown Mesa Association, for pulling it off, putting it together so quickly, and I look forward to future events and next year making it bigger and better than ever. There was a great turnout and lots of activities for the entire family. Also, some of us attended the East Valley Partnership Thought Leadership Forum at Mesa Community College Performing Arts Center. This is on before Christmas, on the benefit of arts and businesses for businesses, and creating livable communities, enhancing the Phoenix East Valley's quality of life. Mike Hutchinson was honored for his work in the arts, and I just want to say thank you to him. He's been a great, since his work as a city manager, he continues putting in the hours in many different ways, and I appreciate his work in the arts as well as many other things. And then I'd want to acknowledge that Phil Austin, an attorney and longtime civil rights activist for our Latino community, suddenly passed on December 20th. It's been a shock to our entire community. He was a neighbor with a business. He's been a mentor to many of us. He's been so involved in the community in many ways. His loss is felt by all of us each and every day. My heart goes out to his family and all those who are very close to him. It's so sudden and shocking for all of us, and I wish peace and closure on that. Services will be held next month. Also, today is a National Day of Mourning for former President Jimmy Carter, and to acknowledge his work as a humanitarian and leader in the United States, and to honor him. He's a great leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duff. I just want to close. It's nice to sit in this meeting and see the sunrise instead of being in the basement. Thank you, Mr. Brady. It's just beautiful. It feels good. Frankie, do you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for all you do.
I'm going to jump in then. Councilor Heredia did the toy drive for Banner Gateway. No, not Banner Gateway. Banner Desert.
Banner Children.
Thank you. Yeah, for the Children's Hospital. And I want to give him kudos to that and our fire department and everyone that helped get all of those toys to those kids. I know they depend on that now every year, and it lasts for throughout the year, all those toys. So thanks for doing that, Councilor Heredia.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just add that this Sunday's Professional Firefighters Association Memorial at Wesley Bullen Plaza there in downtown Phoenix. So if anyone wants to attend, I know Council Members Summers and I will be attending. Mr. Brady, what is our future meeting schedule?
Thank you, Mayor. The next meeting of the council will be on Monday, January 13th, and we'll have meet down here at study session at 5:15, and we'll have our council meeting at 5:45. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll have a motion to.
Can I add just one thing?
You may.
There's an event, oh, never mind. It's not this Saturday, it's next Saturday. It's the historical museum tour. Oh, yeah. The home tour. Okay, never mind. I'll bring it up next week.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Second. All in favor, say aye. 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 We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.